to another episode of That's Business. Today's guest, Hien, is the Chief Prophecy Fulfiller at Huck Finch Studio, a creative studio offering custom Webflow development, site migration, ongoing support services, and visual identity development for growth in late-stage B2B tech stages, as well as Grabbag Studio, which is a design studio serving the unique demands of early-stage startups. Hien, I'm really excited to have you on today because we've been rescheduling back and forth, equally both of our faults, but I'm so pumped to have you on today. So how we doing? Excited?
I'm stoked to be on too. Yeah, like you said, we've been going back and forth, like rescheduling on each other. So it's nice finally to be able to make this happen.
Yes.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So first of all, owning two studios is incredible, but did you know growing up this is what you wanted to do and be this creative individual, or what did you want to be when you grew up?
No, that's a really great question. So I always jokingly say that any good Asian kid, first generation Asian kid on top of that, I was pre-med. So I always expected to be a doctor. And really that was primarily due to the fact that like my dad, when I was 1, he suffered 2 strokes. And so he was a paraplegic.
Wow.
He immigrated to America when Saigon fell, and my mom was a refugee. She was a boat person. So they met like picking like strawberries like as day workers, like in Central California.
Oh my God.
But I say that because like we grew up quite poor. And so like the type of care that he received in hospitals, which he would frequent a lot, was not the best. And so I always aspired to be like, I want to do better than this. And so I moved to Michigan for college, and I was filling out med school applications and realized like, I don't want to be a doctor. I still want to be in healthcare though, but I don't want to be a doctor because I had spent the summer in Nepal in college. And this is a long-winded answer. So
no, this is what I want to hear. This is great.
So I spent the summer in Nepal, and I worked with orphans and created a vaccination program there. And was like, I love this. I love that I can have this like larger community impact. This was never a thing that I even knew was a possibility as a job. And so maybe I can go down this path, like rather than only serving one patient at a time in an OR, I can save a larger population. So I went to hospital administration. I worked for the VA for a bit, did strategic planning there, helped to kind of create like new facilities, develop like that OR for the VA that I worked at. Then I left that. I did consulting, implemented electronic health record. That's where I met my business partner. And we just kind of like got tired of being there, and we were treating it like it was our own business when it wasn't, and we didn't have a piece of it. So then we kind of just like started the blog, and that's kind of where I got into like web design, SEO, email marketing, because it was all things that we needed, right, to kind of get this blog up and going. We started doing workshops. Some of those workshops were attended by business owners. They asked us if we can do some of this work that we were doing on a more personal level for businesses, and we said, yeah, like, sure, we can definitely do this. And then we would do these workshops, and they're like, this is great. Now I know why my business exists. I can articulate it. What do we do with this now? I'm like, you should put it on your website. And they're like, can you do that for us? And they were like, yeah, I think we could do that. So that was kind of how like this started. There's more to it to kind of get to from like everything that we were doing at the time to now just being focused on like Webflow and brand. But I grew up creative. I drew. I was a musician, but like as probably most people, like you get to college and you're like, it's time to grow up. So I kind of like put all that aside. And I think like part of me was not finding fulfillment in like this American dream that I was supposedly living and working for this company. But at the same time, I think a part of me was missing, and that I kind of basically said, you shouldn't exist anymore because that's what kids do, not what adults do. And so now I get to marry kind of a lot of the both worlds where I can be creative, but also marry my skill and strengths, which is like on being more strategic and like thinking from a business standpoint, and having design helped reinforce and support a business.
So a big part of this, of course, is handling parents when you want to veer off the path that you were set out to do. So number one, how did that conversation go down, and what was your parents' feel on that? And number two, when did you kind of make that jump that you were like, I'm ready to do this with your business partner?
Yeah. So the conversation thankfully went pretty well. Like I have to admit, like I fully expected that conversation with my mom to be terrible, for her to be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? You should totally just be a doctor. I don't even understand what this hospital administration means. But she was like, whatever makes you happy. And if this is the path that you want to take, then you should do it. Now, with that said, I have not told her I have my own business, or let alone 2 businesses. I think she would be a little turned off by that and a little scared. Maybe now she'd be okay with it now that, we've been doing this for a few years. But definitely at first I was like, I'm not telling her because I could totally see her being like, I didn't risk my life leaving Vietnam for you to then just throw away, the security of a job to do this thing that, again, I don't understand what this is. But even if I didn't understand your job before, at least like I knew you were getting a paycheck, you were getting benefits, all the stuff, to now you're just doing something I don't understand. So yeah, she doesn't know about this, but I think I'll probably tell her soon.
So she still to this day doesn't know?
She does not know. Yeah, she does not know I have my own business.
So what does she think you do?
She still thinks I work at the consultancy implementing electronic health records. It's actually kind of funny because like my wife has like changed jobs a few times and she's gotten promotions, and we always talk about like all these amazing things my wife is doing. And she's like, I always hear about like all the stuff your wife's doing. I don't hear anything about what you're doing. I was like, yeah, there's something to talk about.
Well, hey, you could say you were featured on a podcast today for your
true.
insights on the industry. There you go. Come on.
That's true.
We
I could
can
tell
twirl
that.
this.
Yeah,
you just led a workshop at Bamboo, I saw. Come on. We got this, Hien. Come on. It's just a wordsmith. The resume writer here can help you out. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. This is why I'm not a copywriter. I deal with the design.
Hey, and I'm not a web developer because, good Lord, I have zero patience. I have so much praise for what you do because it's so important. That's awesome. And it is interesting too, because you're not the first person to tell me that. And another guest that is also a child of immigrants, they still to this day, she's been in business, I think 8 years. She has like 40 employees underneath her. She's kick ass. And they're like, oh, so when are you going to get a real job? And she's like, who do you think is paying for these trips? Like me with my business. So I understand because in your parents' situation, being a refugee, or for your mom being a refugee, it is totally different. And that's like, yeah, you could sit here and say, oh yeah, well, be supportive, but I can't really, you can't relate. I can't relate to what she went through. Yeah. And it's a whole different mindset. And especially when it's your kid. I don't have kids. I don't know if you do, but it's totally different. What you want the best for your kids, or so I've heard. So,
right.
That's awesome. Okay. So we start this and we're kicking ass at it now. So how did that, do we still have the same business partner, or what's kind of the time frame when you started this and developed into the 2 studios you have today?
Yeah. So when we finally realized that we had the idea, this potential of a studio, we were very much like workshop based to start, like very built around strategy and building like a purpose for a brand. We've moved away from strategy a lot now, mostly because it's just me and Matt. We're the 2 employees of both Huck Finch and Grabbag. And we realized that over time, to truly give brand strategy the amount of time and energy it needed, like we just don't have the bandwidth for it, and we'd just be doing ourselves and our clients a disservice. So we'd rather not offer that as a service than do it and do a half-ass job. And so we've just been focusing more on the visual design and website side of things, because we know those are things that we can do really well. We can get those up, and that can immediately serve a benefit for our clients. But we did start this on the side. So the workshops were basically a way for us to still do work, but still maintain our 40 hours that we were doing for this other business. So we were doing on the side, really kind of honed that. And then we went full time in December 2018. We had been talking about it for a minute about going full time, but it kind of was thrusted upon us because we were fired because
I also was fired. So I love a good fire story. Let's hear it.
We were fired because Matt had done a lunchtime workshop for a marketing group, and was talking about brand, and they posted the video on LinkedIn, and then one of our bosses found out and saw it, and then just basically said we violated their non-competes, and then we were fired, which was stupid because we don't implement electronic health record. We do nothing that they do. But right. I was very spiteful and angry about it for a while. I would be lying if I wasn't. But at the same time, I am in a much better place in my life now that I could say that would probably, outside of my wedding day, the best day of my life was getting fired, because it just allowed me to finally do what I was too probably chicken shit to do, which was basically go full time in this thing and figure it out. And the funny thing is that literally days before we were fired, Matt and I were like, I think we both need to just get out of here. Maybe we should talk to them about hey, we want to do this full time. Can you be our first customer? Can we support your website? Can we support your brand? Help us grow, like basically their origin story was them finding a first customer that allowed them to, go full time in this thing, like give this to us. And then literally after coming up with this idea, we were fired. And we're like, well, there goes that idea.
I want to talk through this transition because I also super spiteful. I was pissed. I mean, I told my boss some choice words that I don't recommend saying when you get fired, but your girl burned the bridge and burned it some more. So when did that kind of transition to not being spiteful or then just saying it was the best day of my life? Because mine was very similar. I mean, I went on vacation. I came back. I was like, why do I give a shit about this company that doesn't care about me? Why am I doing this? And then fired the day I came back. So how did that transition happen for you?
Yeah, I hate to admit this about myself, but I am a very competitive person. It's one reason why I have friends who ask me, like, do you want to come over and play board games? And I'm like, it's not because I don't like board games. It's just like, I'm just way too competitive. And I think I will ruin friendships over the
Maybe we need to be on a team together because I'm the same way. I'm like, get your shit together. We're winning this. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm also, I also run like marathons. And one of my things that helps me keep going, especially later on in the mileage, is I pick somebody out in front of me. And I don't know who this person is. There's no offense to them at all, but it's just a mental thing that I do. I was like, you shouldn't be in front of me. So it just allows me to push myself a little bit harder to kind of like, to get past them. Right. So it's a nice little visual thing to kind of like, because it's such a long like thing. So you need like these small wins to kind of like know that you're going in the right direction. And it's like, by the time I pass this person, I'm like maybe a quarter of a mile closer to the finish line, So it's like it's a little kind of thing that I do with myself to kind of like think about these like big projects. So like, what's the next smaller milestone? And so I think subconsciously the spite was there to kind of help like me drive myself that first year of trying to figure this out. And so like, I'm going to essentially prove these guys wrong, that they shouldn't have done this. And then I think after I realized that we have a business now, like this is going on, people know our brand. I think that spite kind of like just dissipated where it was like, I don't need that to carry me anymore. I have a business to run now. I don't have a business to create anymore. I have a business to run. And like this is not supporting that, like that energy. Right.
And I think that's a great point to bring up of supporting that energy too, because the spite, the anger, the competitiveness, I still think is great. And I'm just laughing over here. I know if you're listening, you can't see my face, but I'm just like nodding my head like, yep, me, yep, yep, this sounds right. But I think it's just like different chapters of life or even being a business owner is it's just like, you roll with the punches constantly, but that's what kind of makes you great, of course. So I kind of want to simplify what you do, because if people are listening and they're like, what is Webflow? What do you mean? Like business to business, the strategic plan. So can you give us a snapshot of what problems you solve for businesses or entities and who you typically like to work with?
Yeah. So like, as you gave an introduction, we have two studios. We have Huck Finch and we have Grabbag. And so I'll talk about each and kind of break them down. So I'll start by saying that Huck Finch was our first studio. It's where we were serving both these audiences. We were serving our growth and late stage tech companies, B2B, and our early stage. And when we first went full time, all of our clients initially were these like early stage tech startups. We got them through introductions and things like that. So over time, we were growing and we were picking up like businesses that had more of a budget, they have a marketing team, larger websites. And so our price point started to go up. But we also, so whenever a early stage client would come our way, like while we wanted to do the work, we were looking at it from a profitability standpoint. We're like, well, like if someone's going to pay me like 4 times this to do a website, why would I do this website? Which is like, it's a business decision at the end of the day, right? Because you can't say yes to everything. But we also realized that like, we wouldn't be here without these early stage tech startups. And we do love working with them because they are very innovative. They come with ideas and it's just fun. And it's an entirely different work experience because you're working with typically the founders. They're excited about things. Where on the growth and late stage ones, you're working with like marketing teams. Like you may never meet the founder anymore, the CEO. Like they're so far away in this, like the bureaucracy and the red tape. Like they may not even know you're there to even make a website. So we have been going through a website redesign for Huck Finch, and we realized that we were hitting a wall against the copy, and realized that we were trying to talk to both these audiences, and they're very different. Like budgets are different, timelines tend to be very different. Like the people we work with, like I already said, is different, and the reasons why they need a website or a brand is very different. And so we made the conscious decision this year, after we experimented with a little bit by talking about it and pitching the idea to folks, that we spun out Grabbag to solely focus on early stage tech companies. And Huck Finch is more on the growth and late. So that pretty much just means that like we're working with like B2B tech companies that like have employees, like we're talking like 100 plus employees, they're generating revenue, they have product market fit. Most of them have raised at least like a Series B in terms of funding. Like, so they're much larger, and their challenges tend to be like, we're trying to hit our KPIs. We're trying to get more leads. We're trying to get these like large conversions. And the other side of it too is, as a marketing team, we're trying to generate content, but it's so hard with our existing website to do that. Like, I can't just it takes me days to get a new landing page up or days to get a blog post up. And that's just not going to serve our marketing goals and objectives, where with early stage tech companies, like for them, it's like, I need to get a good enough looking website that's not embarrassing. So then I can go get my first customers, or I can go raise my first round of funding. So it's a very different kind of need. And so we follow the same process essentially, where we come in and figure out like, what is it that you need and how can the design support that? Because at the end of the day, I always like to tell my clients that like, we're probably not the only ones you're looking at as potential partners here. And the table stake thing is, you're going to get a good looking website with no matter whom you go with. So let's just put that on the table, right? So if no matter who you're going with, it's going to be a good looking website, like what do I bring differently? And what I bring differently is I'm going to think about this from a business perspective. And I'm also going to think about it from like, how can this website be set up for you to work with it as efficiently and effectively as possible? And that's why we also use Webflow, because we think it serves best of both worlds, where you can make a really great design forward website that non-designers can maintain and update. So I think I answered the question, but if there's any other questions around that, I can obviously share more.
No, that's great. And I think it's important to think of it from a business perspective too, because I mean, I'll relate our industries because there's a ton of competition for both of us in our industries, but you looking at it from a business perspective of how you can use it in the future, because I don't see a lot of other studios doing that, or it's just, oh, well, it's going to work now. Okay, great. But how is someone that's not technical going to maintain that in the future for growth or for where the world takes them? So that's super interesting. Now, I know another piece of you is you do also host workshops. So what are some of those workshops, speaking engagements, things that you've done previously or what you're really passionate about?
Yeah, I'm really passionate about like helping a business like sort through two things. One is like coming up with like what their position is and how you then communicate that to your audience, right? Because there's like a divide, obviously. And I think a lot of the times, particularly working with startups and tech companies, that you think people will understand what you do right away, but they don't. And the other part of it too is that people don't like to look stupid. So if they don't understand what you do, they're just going to nod and say, cool, and just move on, because they're not going to ask a follow-up question, because it just means they don't understand, right? And most people with their own ego like don't want to admit that. So I always try to look at it as like, what is it that you do? Why does it matter to your audience? Not that it matters to you. Like, you are not your audience. You don't matter really at the end of the day. Like, it's great if you love this copy, but if your audience doesn't understand it, it doesn't matter because it won't sell. And then what do your audience needs to know? What kind of education needs to fall in place for them to fully grasp like what you're offering them? Because these are tech startups. They tend to be very kind of like innovative and like forward thinking, like on the cutting edge, if you will. And that usually means most people don't understand what the hell that means, right? So we have to make sure that people understand what it means and how they can apply it. And one of my like philosophies as I approach design is it's all about balance. Like I just think about everything in terms of the idea of balance. And like I want to balance the uniqueness and novelty of what your business is and balance it with familiarity. Like I want people to be able to like, oh, that's kind of sounds like Airbnb a little bit, but for this particular thing, it's like, yep, exactly. And they're like, okay, I get it now. Right. So like when I design like UX stuff, UI things, like I want to think about it like, well, why would I make this feel different than Airbnb if I'm designing a product when most people have already used that. So the learning curve just dropped. And you don't have to really think about onboarding. Like as soon as they see it, they're like, oh, this just feels like Airbnb. I know how to use this. So yeah, so it's kind of that balance. And I just always try to get that across. And I like doing workshops where I'm like helping people to understand, like, you want to balance those two things of like, yeah, sure, you're unique, but But at the same time, you don't want to be so unique that people don't understand what the hell you are, and they're never going to ask you for clarifying questions to understand what you are.
You said it so well, because it is true. If we don't want to feel stupid, I know, especially being competitive, as I don't like to feel stupid. Like, I'd rather be called others' choice words than stupid. So I know for myself, that's so accurate. And I think it's just around that whole education of, you're never taught all of this. I mean, different people have different niches and different expertise and all, but it's so important to just like simplify that or relate it in technical terms. Or, I like the example of Airbnb and giving that to clients or giving that to people you're working with, because that's an easy, what's going to work for your audience there. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And the other thing I like to do too with these workshops as well is like contextualize the stuff, right? Like, there's like so much out there. If you even look up just the idea of like brand, then it's like brand positioning, brand messaging, brand values, like, all these things. And just like, they all have a role at the end of the day. They're all important, but they may not be important for you right now, right? Like, your most important thing is not figuring this out. Like, your most important thing is this thing, or how do you connect these things together? And I'm very like passionate about that, because it was a lot of like self-learning that Matt and I had to do. We're like, we'll just take it all, like, and we try to use it, and like, it doesn't seem to be working because like the startup doesn't even have any sense of like what these things are, like, and it doesn't really matter to them. We ask them like, what do you want to do in 12 months? They're like, I don't even know if I'm going to be around in 12 months. So this vision idea, it's kind of hard. Like, so like we can't use this for them as much. It's not as valuable as a vision is. Like, it's just hard to contextualize it for them. So I want to help people understand how do you contextualize these things and where the stages where you are. And the other thing that I like to do too from like workshops is being on the business side of things, and being really like a non-creative in a creative world, is realizing that like most creatives hate the stuff that I love, which is this business side of things, right? Like, and they see it as like a hindrance to their creativity, when at the end of the day, like, you can just be as creative with this as you can on the creative side. Like, make it your own, like, make it unique to you. Like, we've taken things and we're like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, who wrote the rule that you have to do it this way? Let's just break this rule and do it a way that we think it makes the most sense. So it doesn't make sense to me to have a discovery call and me to send you a proposal, because I have no idea if this is the right amount of money, and you don't know what I'm paying for, what you're paying for. So we do it. We change it up. We do it differently. Like, just kind of make it your own, right? Like, it's like your own business, so make it your own, and you could have fun with it. And wanting to get people to see that like the real creative part of a creative business is not the final deliverable in the work that you do. It's like, this is the part that's truly creative at the end of the day.
That's such a great point. I mean, that's awesome. And you are right, because a lot of my creative friends hate the business side of it. So that is a more unique approach. And I guess I never even thought about, with startups, and depending on what stage of funding they're at, you're right. They may not be around in the next year or so. It would be hard to plan out that vision. And I think it's going back to one of the first things you said about the whole American dream is it's like, you have to run a business this way. You have to do things this way. And as much as we want to say, oh yeah, we're open-minded, I think deep down that's really deep or really seated in our minds. And that's like the biggest thing I've told people. I'm like, if you don't want to have a business plan, you don't have to. Like, just brain dump it. Do whatever works for you and your flow of things. Unless you need funding, then you need a business plan. But it's really interesting to take it from a very unique perspective. And I think, that sounds like why you're landing clients is just to like meet them where they're at. And that's huge.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we want to take like what we have learned and be able to help other creatives as well. Like, long term, as like our biggest vision is like, moving away from just doing this client work and having more of like, we have like a consultancy that we're calling Hoodwink. That's very much about just supporting creative business, helping them scale and figuring out what makes the most sense for them. Because the way that I look at it too is, let's say you're a graphic designer, right? Like, you're a great graphic designer. Like, how much more can you level up your graphic design skills in order to justify the price that your thing went up? Like, now that you charge $1,000, like, to say you leveled it up 1%, like, how is that discernible to your client to say like, okay, now that I've leveled myself up, I'm going to charge $15 or like $2,000 now for this logo instead of $1,000? Like, your clients is never going to understand that. So like, you can only level yourself up so much to justify the increase in price. So that's where for me, that's why I say like, this is the creative part, because it doesn't have the same constraints as kind of like on your creative skill set. You can only get so much better, and getting better, and that can only lead to so much more money. It's not always, and then they always about money, but like when you quantify it that way, it is, right? So so how can we set up your business where, yeah, you're only making $1,000 a logo, but if 900 of it is profit, then you think you did pretty good versus getting 5,000 for a logo, but only getting $1,000 of that like in profit. Like you just basically, you just netted the same amount of money, right? So it's really kind of getting people, once they start to think about that and see that, they can see, oh, I can actually, that's interesting. And I can start to like really think about how I can make this work for my business.
Wow. You're just so unique in your approaches. And I'm just like wheels are turning here of everything. So you're awesome. Now, if you want to work with Hien, head to the show notes. But as we finish this up, what advice do you have for listeners?
I mean, I think like the big thing is just keep going. Like it takes time. Like this, like, I think like the one thing I always like try to explain to people is like, there's no such thing as an overnight success, right? Like we're here talking, but it took me 6 years. Like someone might listen to this like, wow, he's like very insightful. Maybe hopefully one person says that, or this is really great content. Like I wouldn't have been able to spit the same stuff out like 6 years ago when I first started. Like this took the time and the reps and the understanding and the growth to get here. And so it's going to just take time, and I think the other thing that I would want to share too is two other thoughts. Is one is like, if you feel stuck, part of that is probably like the thing that got you to where you are right now is the thing that's going to keep you where you are right now. So you got to like break some habits. You got to change something in order to like go further the way you want to be. The last thing I will say is that don't be afraid to be ambitious and dream bigger of kind of like what you want, and don't be ashamed of what you want. Like I know what I want. I want the business to be a certain way, and I'm not ashamed of that. Like I probably was before, where I was like, I'm a little worried about saying this out loud because we're just starting, but I'm not ashamed of that anymore. Like I want this thing, and I'm going to want to do what I want to do, and you can get on board with me with it, or you're not, or you don't. It's fine. Like, I'm going to make it happen. But I think like making sure that your dreams are big, so then like you can think about like, oh, the only way I can get there is if I do this, this, and this. Because like if you dream too small, then like there's so many like ways to get there. It's like, oh, like let's say you made like $50,000 last year, and like then the year after that you want to make $60,000. Like there's a bunch of ways to do that. Work more hours, maybe charge more. But then if you said like next year I want to make $300,000, like that's like 6 times more than what you're doing now. It's like, then you got to really think about like, how do I get there, right? Then only so many ways for me to do that. So it forces you within these constraints and limitations, which is that they sound bad, but constraints and limitations are the best things for your business, and because they allow you to be really creative.
Such great advice there. Now, if you want to see what Hien's up to, check out his YouTube channel or all the greatness of the studios, everything you're doing, head to the show notes and tune in again next week for another episode of That's Business.
If you're looking for a career change and you're not sure where to start, the Resume Rescue can help. Sure, there's no such thing as the perfect fit for everyone, but here at the Resume Rescue, we're on a mission to find the perfect solution for you. Whether it's changing careers, updating a resume, learning LinkedIn, or practicing interviewing, we have you covered. Find us online at theresumerescue.com and find all of our contact info in our show notes.